Well, in a certain respect, looking at Marx, how Marx approaches the question of human nature, of understanding human beings, throws into doubt the presuppositions of of the thinkers that we've been looking at thus far. I mean, we've been sort of supposing, or they were supposing, that there was something called human nature and that it was fixed, that it was just there, that we were what we were, and that human beings over the course of time, history, the generations, that whatever they were, that remained constant. It seems that at the very least that Marx is rejecting that, right? Let's just look at this, another paragraph on the first page of the German ideology excerpt. The way in which men, human beings, produce their means of subsistence, that is, the way that we create the things that we need to live, the way that we grow food, the way that we build structures, the way that we produce the useful things of life. The way in which men produce their means of subsistence depends, first of all, on the nature of the actual means of subsistence they find in existence and have to reproduce. That is, we all find ourselves in a society that produces its means of subsistence in a certain way, maybe in a factory, maybe on a farm, maybe in a workshop, maybe through computers, maybe with analog technology. We all find ourselves in a certain spot in history that determines how we produce the things that we as human beings need to live. This mode of production must not be considered simply as being the production of the physical existence of the individuals. That is, it's not just that we need to do this to reproduce our physical and to keep in existence our physical being, food, drink, shelter, etc. Rather, this mode of production is a definite form of activity of these individuals, a definite form of expressing their life, a definite mode of life on their part. As individuals express their life, basically as they work, as we'll see, right? The way in which they work. As individuals express their life, so they are. What they are, therefore, coincides with their production, both with what they produce and with how they produce. And here's the kicker. The nature of individuals thus depends on the material conditions determining their production. And wait a second, right? The nature of individuals, and he means human individuals, thus depends on the material conditions determining their production, which again directly implies that our nature as human individuals is not something which is fixed, but is a product, is an effect of a certain mode of production, a certain, let's just say, general point in human history where things are a certain way, and that our nature, therefore, is changeable. That we as human beings have no nature per se, but that we produce our nature, that our nature is an effect of the way in which our societies are organized, I think it would be fair to say. Which is a very different way of approaching the question of how to understand what it means to be a human being. One of the things that Marx would say that distinguishes his way of approaching the question of understanding human beings from Thomas Aquinas's or Plato's or Descartes is that they were ideologists. Now that's an interesting word, ideology. It doesn't quite, I think, mean in Marx what it means now primarily. They were people, those other thinkers who were concerned with ideas, saying that ideas were first. You understand ideas, you understand reality. No, Marx says, ideas are effects. Whatever ideas we have are the outcome of certain material conditions and material activity. What do we need to do to live? How are our societies organized in terms of the production of our what we need to subsist? Those conditions will create ideas. The ideas are second. let's look at this paragraph here on the second page of the excerpt. The production of ideas, of conceptions, of consciousness is at first directly interwoven with the material activity and the material intercourse of men, the language of real life. Conceiving, thinking, the mental intercourse of men appear at this stage, at this early stage of human civilization, as the direct efflux, the direct outcome, the direct effect of their material behavior. The same applies to mental production, as expressed in the language of politics, laws, morality, religion, metaphysics, etc. of people. Men are the producers of their conceptions, ideas, etc., real active men, as they are conditioned by a definite development of the productive forces and of the intercourse corresponding to these up to its furthest forms. Consciousness can never be anything else than conscious existence, and the existence of men is their actual life process. If in all ideology men and their circumstances appear upside down as in a camera obscura, this phenomenon arises just as much from their historical life process as the inversion of objects in the retina does from their physical life process. What is he getting at the end there? Philosophers have always seen human beings upside down. They've thought that what's most important is consciousness, and that's what is definitive. But Marx is saying, well, you got to flip it. People's thinking, their consciousness, their mental life is determined and conditioned, if not determined, at least conditioned by their material life. That is what they need to do to survive. So Marx would say he's a materialist. That is, as he says in the next sentence here, in direct contrast to German philosophy, which descends from heaven to earth, or from the mental to the physical, from ideas to material life. Here we ascend, we go up from earth to heaven. And as Marx is saying, we study human beings in terms of how their material lives are actually organized, and that allows us to understand their mental life. We don't start with their mental life and assume that that's primary. We start with their material life. We assume that's primary, and that their mental life, their culture, their religion, their, as he says, their laws, morality, politics, their philosophy, metaphysics, it is all an outcome of what is more primary, and that is what they actually do to live. So as he says here, life is not determined by consciousness, but consciousness by life. There is no human consciousness per se. The forms of our consciousness, maybe consciousness itself, I don't know, are determined by our material life. Well, that is indeed a different way of approaching the thing, which, again, brings in all sorts of other considerations that maybe weren't even conceivable in these earlier philosophers. And I would say that the most prominent of these is history. Generally speaking, I suppose one has to imagine that human beings, their knowledge of their own history as a species, their knowledge of the history of the Earth, their knowledge that the Earth even has a history, is a very new discovery. I mean, before around 1800, I don't think anybody really had much of a notion that the human species or the Earth was ever any different than it appeared today. And then there was a revolution in thinking in the 19th century, and definitely into the 20th century, where human beings became more and more aware that the Earth itself has a history, that it hasn't always been the way it is now. And after Darwin, of course, that the human species has a history. That is, that it emerged out of previous species and hasn't always been in its present form. That is, we've become more and more historical in our thinking. And Marx is very important for that. Because the claim here is obviously that human nature is an evolving thing. That is, if history changes the conditions under which human beings produce, then history also changes human nature.